Good afternoon, everyone. All right, we have yet another options review going on. I'm going to review my futures right at the end of this. I mean, I only took one trade on futures. Finished today mildly or roughly medium green on options. Very small red on futures, just one trade. And yeah, so this month, I guess it was good while I was gone. I guess for a week. One of the weeks I was gone, price action was good. But for most of this October, for me, it's been pretty crappy price action. Very indecisive, but we're still trending up. It seems like most of the mornings. I mean, this was yesterday's price action on ES. Look at this. We had one singular move to the upside that I caught on futures. The rest of the day was chop. And this is happening quite a bit. This day was pretty decent for a little bit, and then super indecisive and choppy. Notice that most of the movements are happening in the roughly the afternoon, which is an issue for me because I trade in the mornings for options. However, so we gapped up today, but however, we had a fantastic pre-market setup this morning. We had a perfect double top on ES, so I'm extremely bullish for that to break to the upside. And we also gapped up pretty hard, leaving a nice pivot up here. So I'm very bullish for these pivots to break to the upside. And I'm triggered in pretty much the second, this wick invalidates. Well, this is actually what it looked like 1 minute before market open. And this is the first candle of market open. Now, unfortunately, it got this selling wick right after I entered. And you guys know I only enter roughly in the last 5 to 10 seconds of the candle. So before the candle closes. And so I entered calls roughly here. I entered them at 2.5 SPS calls. Now, NQ was a little bit stronger, but NQ already took out this high, so I didn't trust it to remain strong. And this was my first trade. Now, this ended up being just a normal size trade. And it went up again, got very close, and the calls are actually moving very well this morning. Very, very well. But I ended up stopping out. Now, I stopped out. I believe it was this candle. This candle got a small green one. Once this bounce invalidates, I stopped out. And it was here. No, it wasn't. Yeah, it was. Right at the start of this candle, about halfway down. I actually filled at 2.1. So I lost 16% on that trade. It was very interesting because during that trade, I mean, very rarely do the contracts like reverse chop. They were reverse chopping. On this candle, I was green by like 10%, which is odd because I entered a market open. So typically it's the opposite. For whatever reason, Ivy was climbing this morning, and I was actually green right here. So I sold for a very small loss, which was very nice. Now we did dump to the downside. I don't really have any short trades that I can take. It's just this. Now I did say in chat, if we come back up, I plan on being very heavy in calls. Because now this weak supply, I mean, it's two small supply zones, a 45-minute and a 30-minute, has been tested multiple times, right? We still have this perfect double top. It is very, very, very likely for this pivot to break to the upside. So if we come back up, I will be back in. We started bouncing here. NQ swept demand. ES did not sweep that pivot though. And I ended up filling on my calls. Let me see the exact instance I filled on them. This candle here. Filled SPX calls here. NQ was a little bit stronger. Again, I just didn't trust it though because they had a bearish liquidity sweep. ES didn't. Here's my PT all the way up here. Stop losses all the way down here. And here's how this pretty much worked. So I said I was going to enter very heavy. However, we weren't close enough to the PT yet. And we missed this pivot down here. That's reason for this to go against me. Um, so I entered normal size here, but I planned on adding. Okay. So I entered normal size here, but I wanted this trade to be heavy. So I actually plan on adding. This is one of the first times in a while that I plan to be heavy on this trade. And again, I will never size in such a way that I'll be unwilling to take a loss. So I don't recommend you guys sizing heavy or any differently on any trade unless your psychology is fantastic and you're able to take a loss, right? I can enter 5x my normal size on a trade and I'll stop out for minus 30, 40%. I don't care, right? So, anyways, this is where I entered. And I'm looking to average up here for a 2x size trade, roughly up here above 68.86 is what I said. By then, most of the supply is invalidated, the selling wick is invalidated. It'll have a clear shot to explode above that point. And I thought I was going to stop out here. But we got a green candle. I told you guys live when this happened. If this bounce invalidates, I'm out because I think it's going to break demand. Well, it did not invalidate, and I ended up adding here because this drop invalidated. Now the contract started chopping really, really, really bad. I took my average down at 2.1 here, so it was not a good time. Actually, it wasn't even here. It was a little bit further up here on this candle, pretty much at the height of this candle, 2.1. Now, if I remember correctly, the low of day for these contracts right here was like 1.9, okay? And then right here, the lowest it got to was roughly 1.8, which is normal. And then it got even worse, right? Right here, it got to 1.8. So it was 1.9 right here, my calls were, and then it was 1.8, and then it was 1.8. So you see how the market's not going down nearly as far, yet the contracts are plummeting with these drops. These contracts were awful. It was a really rough time. Anyways, I'm 2x leveraged now, and I was still planning. I'm like, you know what? I'll still take my last average up if we do break above 68.86. It is a fairly risky thing to do. The trade will be nearly guaranteed at that time, but regardless, I will honor my stop loss if it comes down to it, and my new stop loss will be roughly there. Well, we ended up coming back down. I thought I was going to stop out, but we didn't, and we popped right back up. And on this pullback here at 650, the calls got all the way down to 1.55. And by the time they popped back up, keep in mind, this is where I entered initially at 2.3. By the time they popped back up, they were at 2.0 flat. So the contracts were starting to chop a lot. Now, I did end up taking my final ad roughly here. It was actually on this candle around 655. And that ad was at 2.2. So even though we're all the way up here, I mean, we're almost halfway to PT. These contracts are only at 2.2. I entered 2.3 down here. So now I'm 3x leveraged on this trade. Very hard stop loss now right here. And with the way this is going up, this is starting to suck a lot. Because even right here, at the close of this candle, I was actually slightly red on this trade. The calls were at 2.1. So it's very frustrating that the calls were chopping a lot because not only was I super heavy in this trade, but if we stop out, at this point, I'm going to lose 40 to 50%. And if it hits PT, I'd be lucky to even get 10% because these freaking calls aren't going anywhere. But regardless, honor the trade, whatever. And, if the heavy sizing ends up being a mistake, I'll review it and not make that mistake again. But regardless, I will stop out. Anyways, I ended up getting lucky and it finally broke to the upside and I had a huge win. I sold pretty much my entire position minus one runner, which I sold shortly afterwards. I sold it for a little over 40% gains on a 3x leverage trade. Okay. So my first trade was minus 16% on a 1x, my normal size. Then I took 40% on a 3x leverage trade, which is the same as one normal trade, 120%. Okay. So I'm very green on the day now. I'm green by like 2.5, 40% trades. I'm like, all right, that's probably gonna be my last trade. However, if we do come all the way back down, I'm okay betting against demand because we have a bearish liquidity sweep. We've invalidated a majority of the move. We've also invalidated a majority of this demand. Right, the demand's still there, but it's very tested. If we come all the way back down, I'm okay taking a put trade, half size, uh, to demand, and averaging down to see if the head and shoulders happens or averaging up accordingly. This was the last trade I took. It was like roughly here, I believe. 719 was my fill, right? Yes. And I filled half size. Now, mildly risky because there was a potential head and shoulders. But ES was weaker than NQ. It looked pretty decent. As you can see, NQ was going up, ES wasn't, but then we started exploding to the upside. I'm like, okay, I'm probably just going to stop out half size unless we come back down. If we come back down, then it'll be fine. Then I'll take my average down. And it was kind of complicated, but NQ did end up getting high of day. It did end up sweeping. And I added at 734. So roughly, yeah, here at this sweep. Right when NQ swept high of day, I'm like, all right, NQ's potentially bearishly sweeping high of day. I'll have a hard stop loss right here. Now this is 1x normal trade with an average of roughly 2.45. Unfortunately, ES kept squeezing and I stopped out on this candle. I stopped out at 1.7. Actually, no, I didn't. I didn't stop out on this candle. Right when this pullback invalidated, I stopped out. So we started pulling back, started going okay for a little bit. ES was a lot weaker, but then I stopped out pretty much right at the start of this candle for minus 30%, which is pretty unfortunate. Looking back on it, I think this trade's an okay trade to. I thought this trade was an okay trade to take. I mean, ES was so much weaker than NQ. NQ looked decent to, put in the head and shoulders and get down. But this small 1 hour demand seemed magical today. And also, ES was just so, like, during this first trade, every single bounce just kept invalidating until it finally squeezed. So based on this price action here, I personally believe once we got back into this demand and maybe rounded off a head and shoulders, that the bears would show back up and finally finish what they were trying to do earlier, which is cause this demand to break. But it looks like they lost the battle again. Did end up being a good stop loss. Not a huge loss, 30%. But it still ended up being a green day only because of that one trade, me being 3x size. Because if you add up my losses and add up my wins pretty much totaled out to 120%. Losses totaled out to 46%. So today finished like a medium green day by 2 green trades. So not a bad day. But lately in October, it's just been shitty win rates. Pivots aren't really being swept like they used to. Very indecisive price action, but still trending upwards, which is very interesting. It's usually just the chop that's, it's mostly chop with short bursts of strong trend, right? Yesterday's a prime example of this. Yesterday we had CPI going on, chopping all over the place. Had a win right here, had some losses because I was bullish to this pivot. One of those was avoidable. And then short burst, I make money on it, and then chop the rest of the day. I mean, this happened quite a bit. Last Thursday was fine. I did good on last Thursday. Or, eh. It was mild green. This was okay too. I couldn't really go short much on this day because we were chopping down so much. And we had no bearish consolidation except for right here. Again, This is just chopping down. Finally made money on this though. So really it's just been chopping for the most part in these mornings, and then we finally get a break and go. This was a pretty decent day though. We did very well on this day. But most days it's just like here. Like this is atrocious here. So I'm hoping that November is better than October. It seems like the mornings are getting more and more decisive the higher we get up in the market. We've been going up for months and months and months on end. The market seems extremely overbought, and everyone kind of knows it, but it's still kind of just going up. And I notice most of the good trends aren't happening until this afternoon. I mean, if I exit out of this, you can see the trend becomes very defined in the afternoons, which sucks because I don't really trade the afternoon. And I don't really have any strategies that include, as far as day trading is concerned. Investing is something different. But as far as day trading is concerned, I don't have any strategies that just, allow me to be triggered in by just blindly buying the top and hope the top gets higher. And that's pretty much what would have been making me the most money over the last couple of months or month and a half, is that just buy sometime in the middle of the day and just hope the day closes a lot higher than where you bought. And I mean, if you do that, you'd be doing pretty well. You know, yesterday would have been pretty much break even. The day before would have been green. The day before was a bearish day, so I don't really think that counts. But if you did buy in the middle of the day, it did end up going on a huge run. You would have been green. Uh, this day, not really. But most of all of these days, that's what's pretty much happening, as you can see. So we'll see what November brings. But until then, all I can really do is execute my edge, have flawless psychology, and even though the win rate's going to be worse for I don't know how much longer, I'm still making money week over week. It's just a bit less. So as long as I'm making money and my psychology is perfect, I am happy. And yeah, that pretty much concludes my options review. And it's crazy that still, right now, we're exploding upwards. But keep in mind, next week is a huge week. We have FOMC interest rate decision, which is huge. We have all of the big tech earnings starting next week. Next week is a very, very high impact week. So most of today's price action, or not today's, this week's price action will be speculation of what's going to happen next week. So we'll see. Hopefully we can get some more decisive market opens. But does anyone have any questions regarding this analysis from this morning? Oh, everyone's good? All right, sweet. Well, I'm going to conclude the recording here. I'll post it to the YouTube. That way you guys can see. And then right after I do that, I'll show you guys the one single futures trade that I took today.